بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So in the previous lesson we continued our discussion of the creation of paradise and hellfire, and we looked at the affair of those destined for paradise and those destined to the hellfire. And as a summary of that discussion, or the main part of the discussion, basically we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are basically two things. The first is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He deals with adl, with justice, with respect to His creation. And from the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He bestowed upon man the faculties of hearing, as-sam' wal-basar, and seeing, and made him have irada, which is the wish, the desire, gave him qudra, which is power, ability, gave him aql, the ability to reason, to think, to reason, to decide, to choose. And then He revealed books, al-kutub, and sent messengers, ar-rusul. And these books and these messengers, they draw the people's attention to the signs of Allah, the Iyaad, the signs of Allah in the creation, and the bayyinat, which are the clearly evident or self-evident truths which everyone can see and recognize. And so they draw their attention to these affairs, and when they look at these affairs, the fitrah of every person naturally tells them and informs them of, or affirms and establishes the rububiyyah of Allah and the uluhiyyah of Allah. And the messengers explain the path of guidance and success and the path of misguidance and destruction. So all of these affairs is from the adl, justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala towards His creation. He did not leave them without guidance. He did not leave them without any faculties. He gave them everything by which justice has been established and they can rightfully be held accountable. In fact, so just is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that a person is not punished until the sending of a messenger. As Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا, that we are not to punish. We are not those who punish until after we have sent the messenger. Which means that a person, for example, might know that which is right and wrong by way of his aql. Just by pure reason, he might know that something is right and wrong. But the actual punishment upon a person is only established after the sending of a messenger, meaning after he knows through revelation that this is wrong and this is right. Right? So from all of this we can clearly see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has behaved with adl, with justice towards His creation. And so therefore, anyone who chooses misguidance and disbelief and sin and disobedience and so forth, then that person rightfully deserves to be punished. There's no injustice anywhere to be seen in the whole of that. Now, On top of this, so there's adl, and now on top of this, there is Allah's fadl. Allah's fadl is His bounty, His favor, in that He aids and He supports certain people about whom He knew that they are those who desire guidance, who want guidance. Meaning, after establishing the adl upon His creation by way of all those things that we mentioned, amongst them are those who, recognizing that truth, they want guidance. So knowing them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives them i'ana. I'ana meaning He aids them. He will give them aid. So therefore, He will give them and grant them success in following His guidance. And because they showed a desire in their hearts that they want guidance, they want rectification, they want piety, they want forgiveness from Allah, they want His paradise, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives them success, meaning He gives them something additional. And that additional is His tawfiq, meaning He grants them success. There are situations which are created around them. He inspires them. He gives them ilham, inspires them in the sense that they are given the right thoughts, the right desires, and they pursue the guidance. So this now is Allah's fadl. It is something additional which Allah gives to the servant, which leads to the servant being guided. And that's because Allah knew from His foreknowledge that this group of people, they will want guidance and they will choose certain actions. So He simply gives them tawfiq and grants them success and gives them all of the ways and means in the actions that they are going to perform, which will eventually lead them into paradise. So therefore, we have two issues. The first is that there is Allah's adl, there's Allah's justice. Allah establishes justice upon the whole of His creation. And then there are those whom He will just leave. This is tark. He will leave them without anything additional. The fact that He's abandoned them to themselves does not mean that He has been unjust in any sense of the word. Why? Because all those things that He established, hearing, seeing, intellect, books, messengers, signs, self-evident truths, reason, choice, all of that is from Allah's adl to begin with. So some of them He just abandoned and left them with that. And others, He gave them tawfiq, and this is Allah's fadl. Right, so this is the main point that we basically established in the previous lesson. And from there now we're going to continue. And remember, we said that this whole discussion is connected. The issue of paradise and hellfire already being created, and the inhabitants of hellfire and paradise already being known, and their actions decreed upon them. That all of these things lead one into the other, and so therefore inevitably we are coming back to the issue of al-qada wal-qadr. So we move to the next statement of Imam al-Tahawi. In fact, before we go into that, we also mentioned that disbelief emanates from an individual. We mentioned that kufr, that iman is something that Allah beautifies in a person. He gives tawfiq to a person. We mentioned that the proofs in that regard, that guidance, iman, is from Allah. And disbelief is from the servant. And we mentioned the various ayat in the Quran which clearly prove that that is the case. In the case of the believers, Allah makes iman beautified in their hearts. And when He speaks about the disbelievers, He says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, that the kufr came from them indeed, those who disbelieve. So, this now leads us to the next statement in At-Tahawi's Creed. And this is the statement, وَكُلٌّ يَعْمَلُ لِمَا قَدْ فُرِغَ لَهُ, that everyone works deeds in accordance to that which has already been basically written for him. وَصَائِرٌ إِلَى مَا خُلِقَ لَهُ, and he will proceed towards that for which he was created. He will proceed towards that destination, eventual destination, for which he was created. وَكُلٌّ يَعْمَلُ لِمَا قَدْ فُرِغَ لَهُ وَصَائِرٌ إِلَى مَا خُلِقَ لَهُ. Everyone will work deeds in accordance to that which has been basically decreed upon him. And he will travel towards that eventual destination for which he was created. Okay, so this means, the general statement here is that from all of those that Allah created, they will all work in accordance with whatever has been written for them in the book. And this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows exactly what each and every single servant is going to do. This is from His complete, perfect, prior foreknowledge. And so because He knew what each and every servant was going to do, their deeds were written down in the book. And the one who is going to do good deeds, all of that will be written down in detail. The one who will do evil deeds, all of that is written down in detail. And that necessitates that each person is going to do, this one's going to do good, that one's going to do evil. This is something that is known and established, and for that reason, the Messenger of Allah, he said, اعملوا فكل ميسر لما قد خلق له. He said, work deeds, for indeed each person it will be made easy for each person that for which he has been created. Meaning work righteous deeds. Work righteous deeds. Because each person will have it made easy for him for that for which he was created. So what does this mean now? Let's just recap and put the discussion into context. It means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created paradise. He created paradise, we've established that. And He created people for paradise. There's a group of people created for paradise. And such a person will keep doing those deeds until he arrives at paradise, the thing for which Allah created him. Right? So Allah created paradise, created some people to enter that paradise. Then those people will do certain deeds that will lead them to enter into paradise. And then Allah created hellfire, and then He created inhabitants for hellfire. And those people will do the deeds that will then lead them to go into hellfire. And this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows the deeds of all of His servants. He knows the deeds of all of His servants. And He knew that this particular individual, when his soul, when it is breathed into this body, and when he reaches maturity and he is given hearing, seeing, intellect, choice, power, ability, and he comes to understand the message, the books, the messengers, the signs, whatever, the two paths, that he will choose this, and he will do this, he will disbelieve, and he will commit shirk, or whatever else that he's going to do. This is in Allah's complete, perfect, prior foreknowledge. And so that has been written down. And that writing down is an indication of the decree and Allah's prior knowledge. And so therefore, when a person does whatever he does, out of his own choice, out of his own will, out of knowledge, he's not forced in any form or fashion to do whatever he's doing. Right? So there's no conflict between Allah's prior knowledge and Allah's writing down that knowledge, and Allah willing that person to do that which he's going to do, and Allah bringing out that person's actions by giving him all of those faculties, the faculty of hearing, of seeing, of qudra, of power, of irada, of wish. Right? So this is where we have to now be, we have to and clearly understand how all of this is working, together. So, what does this therefore mean then? What does it mean? It means, as Tahaawiyyah says in the next sentence, وَالْخَيْرُ وَالشَّرُّ مُقَدَّرَانِ عَلَى الْعِبَادِ. Goodness and evil are decreed upon the servants. Goodness and evil are decreed upon the servants. Goodness and evil are decreed upon the servants. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean? This means that whatever the servant does of goodness and whatever the servant does of evil, that it is something that didn't come from himself without prior qadr. Right, so pay attention to all of this now. وَالْخَيْرُ وَالشَّرُّ مُقَدَّرَانِ عَلَى الْعِبَادِ. Goodness and evil are decreed upon the servant. What does that mean? It means that everything the servant does, whether it's good or evil, it didn't take place initially through him or just by him. Why? Because we know that there is prior qadr. We know that there is qadr, meaning that there was some prior determination that took place before this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who decreed that upon him. Decreed that upon him. Now when we say that Allah decreed that upon him, what exactly do we mean? This is why you have to keep all these thoughts together now at the same time. Right? We have to bring all these thoughts together at the same time. It means that Allah created paradise. Then He created for it inhabitants. Right? He created souls that will inhabit paradise. He knew about each and every single soul when it is placed in into its body, and it reaches maturity, and it is given aql, hearing, seeing. It is shown guidance. It is shown the signs of Allah that this soul will believe, and that this soul will want guidance. And Allah knows that this soul will do deeds, such and such deeds. Given all of the circumstances around it, it will do certain deeds that will be part of the cause, in addition to Allah's mercy, as to why that individual will go to paradise. So that knowledge, that ilm of Allah was then written down. And so the kitabah, the qadr, so this therefore now is in the ilm of Allah, and it is written down. And then Allah, He brought all of that into being, right? He wished that to be, and He created the circumstances for that person and decreed all of that, give that person the circumstances in which he will do those actions that Allah knew from him, right? So Allah facilitated that which is his eventual destination, right? And as a result of that, that person will go to paradise. And so really no action that this person did actually came initially from himself. Do you understand this point now? That all of it is preceded by qadr. And no person ever brings anything ibtida'an, like meaning from himself, without there being any prior qadr. Right? So is that clear? Right? This is important because it's going to show us, as we shall see later on, how this is different to what the Mu'tazila say, yeah? The Qadariyah, those basically who deny Al-Qadr. Right? Because here we're making the link between Allah's knowledge, the writing, Allah's irada, to wish and to bring, things into being, and then His khalq, meaning His actual creating, right? Those things to come into being, which includes the actions of the servants. There's a connection between all, there's no break in between. There's a connection between all of that. All these levels are connected. And so, when we say here that goodness and evil are decreed upon the servants, it means that there was something that came before the action of the servant. There was taqdeer. There was the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, this is what we mean when we say that Allah decreed it upon them. قَدَّرَ عَلَيْهِ ذَلِكَ. When Allah decreed upon them, It means Allah knew that from that person, from his prior knowledge. He wrote it down, and then he aided him to do that which he knew from him. So the believer who will enter paradise, he aided him in doing the deeds of the people of paradise. And the disbeliever whom he knew would be a disbeliever and would is destined for hellfire, he facilitated for him the deeds that will eventually lead him to the hellfire. Now, this is where we have to be clear in our minds that there is no injustice in any of this at all. Why? Because when Allah created that individual, as we said, He gave him all of the ways and the means, and He established adl, justice, with respect to him. The fact that Allah knew in His complete and perfect knowledge beforehand does not mean that that person was forced to do what he did. That's not binding. Right? These two things are not binding. The fact that Allah wrote down what He knew from that person does not mean that the person was forced to do what he did. Even though we believe and we accept that nothing takes place except that it is in the book, that it is in the kitab. And so, all of goodness, all of evil, that when it takes place, it is taking place by the will, the mashi'ah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing comes outside of the ilm, or the writing, or the mashi'ah, or the khalq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, can you see where this discussion is going? What we're basically saying is that there is nothing in this creation. The general point here now then is, there is nothing in this creation that comes outside of Allah's rububiyyah. Right? There's nothing which comes outside of Allah's ilm. There's nothing which comes outside of the book. There is nothing which escapes the irada, the mashi'ah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is nothing that comes out of Allah's creative power. And when we understand all of those things, it means that Allah is the one who decrees good, Allah is the one who decrees evil. And nothing the servant does comes or originates from himself, separate from the prior qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we can grasp this concept, if we can grasp this, and it will allow us to fully appreciate the mistakes of the Qadariyah, who deny al-Qadr, and the Jabariyah, who exaggerate in al-Qadr, which is what we're going to discuss as we proceed through these pages, inshallah ta'ala. So, al-khayru wa-sharru muqaddarani ala al-ibad. Where is this taken from? It is taken straight from the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, in which he mentioned about, when he mentioned about al-iman, wa an tu'mina bil-qadr, وَأَن تُؤْمِنَ بِالْقَدَرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ. That you believe in al-qadr, it's good and it's evil. So therefore good and evil are decreed upon the servants. Now, before we move into looking at the sects, the Jabariyah and the Qadariyah, and starting that discussion, we need to be clear about this. So is there any questions that anybody has before we move forward into the next section? So it's important to understand here that man is, in fact, let me do it in the form of questions. Is man the creator of his own actions? Does man create his own actions? Everybody agreed on no? Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Man does not create his own actions. Man did not create his own actions. Allah is the creator of his actions, whether good or whether evil. Why? Because Allah created, He made him to be after not being. He was nothing, then he came to be. Then He gave him all of the faculties of hearing, seeing, understanding, the qudra, ability, through which he can, act. And so anything that he does, then really it's a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So conversely, is man the creator of his own actions? So basically, we said no. So conversely, is Allah the creator of his actions? And the answer is yes. That's right, yeah? The answer is yes. Now, is man the doer of his own actions? Does he do his own actions? Of course, he's the one who does his actions. Right? So when a man prays, who's praying? It's him who's praying. We don't say Allah is the doer of his actions, because that's incorrect. So is the man the doer of his actions? Yes. Is Allah the doer of his actions? Conversely, is Allah the doer of man's actions? Is Allah the doer?
No, sorry.
Of course not. Yeah. So we have the Khaliq, the creator, and we have the Fa'il. The Fa'il, yeah. Khaliq, Fa'il. Allah is the Khaliq. Allahu Khaliqu kulli shay, is of everything, and man is the Fa'il. Right, so that's clear now. Now, is man the chooser of his own actions? Does Allah choose his own actions? Is he the murid with irada or mashi'ah? Does he have mashi'ah? Does he have irada? Does he choose?
Yeah, he chooses, yeah.
Yeah, of course he does. Does Allah choose his actions? Yes.
Yeah.
See, in this set of two questions, the answer is yes and yes. Right? Why? Because a man's irada comes under the irada of Allah, or a man's mashi'ah. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. See the difference there now, yeah? Right? So we've got three sets of questions. Right? Is man the creator of his own actions? No. Allah is the creator of his actions. Is man the doer of his actions? Yes. Allah is not the doer, the fa'il of man's actions. Does man choose his actions? Yes. Is man's will under the will of Allah? Does Allah will the actions of the man? Yes. Yes and yes. Why? Because no one's irada escapes the irada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those sets of questions help to solidify what we are kind of discussing here. And so anyway, the basic point being, the point that we're making here is that nothing comes out of the rububiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you can see where we're going with this, because where we're leading to now is we are leading to understanding how and why the saying of the Qadariyah, that man creates his own actions, how this is really basically affirming another deity alongside Allah. Because you are taking man outside of the rububiyyah of Allah, something from what he does, his will and his actions. You're taking that out of the rububiyyah of Allah, and that discussion will come inshallah in a short while if we have time for that at the end of this lesson. But so if we move on, so any questions on any of that?
Four levels of Qadr, those four levels mentioned.
Yeah.
So those are the four pillars of Al-Qadr.
That's right, yeah. So, those are the four pillars of Al-Qadr: Al-Ilm, Al-Kitaba, Al-Irada, or Al-Mashi'ah, Al-Mashi'ah, and Al-Khalq, creation. Allah's ilm, Allah's knowledge, writing down of that ilm in the kitab, Al-Kitaba, and then Allah's irada, Allah wishing, decreeing everything to occur with this Mashi'ah, and then Al-Khalq, meaning Allah actually creating either the essences of beings or the actions performed by those beings. Why? Because He gave them the faculties, the facilities by which to act. So really, He is the creator. And so the intent behind all that is that when we say wal khayru wa sharru muqaddarani ala al-ibad, they're both evil and both good, it means that when a person, say for example, he commits disbelief, let's say he commits an act of shirk, that act of shirk isn't something the servant initiated from his own self, meaning as in, although he is the fa'il, we know he's the doer, we know he's done that action, we know he did the deed, but that deed was preceded by the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Allah knew it, Allah wrote it, Allah willed it to be, and Allah created that person and the circumstances and the person's deeds, right? All of that is under the rububiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So no one escapes the qadr of Allah. All good, all evil right, is preceded by the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So nothing begins ibtida'an from any one of us. Nothing initiates from any one of us. Right, and that's the key point that we need to keep in mind, because this is connected to the discussion that comes afterwards. Right, so so far we've explained the correct belief and the correct way of thinking and the correct concepts in relation to this topic. And so from here, the sects which deviated on the issue of al-qadr, and specifically on good and evil and the actions of the servants, there are two opposing groups, and they are on the one hand the Jabariyah, and on the other hand they are the Qadariyah, Jabariyah and the Qadariyah. Now, just briefly for now, the Jabariyah, they say that the servant is forced to do everything. And that he's just like, when you tie a strip of leather, for example, onto the branch of a tree, and the wind blows the strip of leather, the leather has no control. Or it's like plants, for example, you have a plant blown by the wind, has no choice whatsoever. So, they are saying that man has no choice whatsoever, and he is compelled to do whatever Allah wills upon him. And the servant does not have any ikhtiyar, no choice. Whether that is for good or for evil. And then on the other side, opposing them, is the Qadariyah, and they say, well, goodness and evil, they are not decreed upon the servant. Both good and evil are not decreed upon the servant. Rather, they are actions the servant does from himself, from his own choice, independent of the rububiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is outside. So basically they take it outside, and there are two groups amongst them. Those who are the extremists, they say they take it outside the knowledge of Allah and the writing, the book of Allah, meaning the kitabah, and it is outside the will of Allah, and it is outside the creation of Allah, meaning Allah has no control over what they do. Allah has, in the extreme ones, they say Allah has no knowledge of what they do until after it happens. Rather, He's just watching what they're going to do, and He doesn't know what the next action is going to be until it happens. Right? He's seeing how they're behaving without knowing before how they're going to behave. Nor does He will what they're going to do, nor does He create what they're going to do. Right? So the servant is completely outside, and so he chooses his own creations. All that Allah is going to do is just to hold them to account. Allah had no role in willing and creating the actions. He's just going to hold them to account based upon what He saw them doing. He did not create the actions of the servants, and He did not create goodness in the actions of the servant. He did not create evil in the actions of the servants, and He didn't decree them upon the servants either. He didn't decree the actions upon the servants either. And all of this is for a reason. It's for a false reason that we've discussed before, in that they thought that when they look at the concept of justice in the actions of men, they wrongly presume that that the concept of justice with Allah has to be in the same way, right? So obviously this is something that we've spoken about before. We can speak about it again, inshallah, later. But so once we have that basic idea of the two groups, right? So can you see the general idea what's taking place now? One group is kind of exaggerating in Tawheed by saying that if we allow man to have his own will and his choice, and for him to do his own actions, really we are stepping outside the boundaries of Allah's rububiyyah. This is kind of like an attack on the Tawheed of Allah. And so they wrongly, out of this presumption, they say, well, Allah must be the one who is doing all the actions and forcing the servants to do the actions, right? And then on the other side, with the Qadariyah, we are seeing what they're trying to do is they're trying to take the actions of the servants outside the rububiyyah of Allah by claiming the concept of justice. Right? They're saying, well, how can Allah decree evil actions upon a servant and then punish him? Where's the justice in that? How can Allah decree righteous deeds upon a servant and then reward him? What's the reward for? Where's the justice in that? Right? So they're employing this concept of justice that they see from the servants and thinking that Allah's justice has to be in the same way. Right? So one group is thinking Tawheed, Allah, nothing comes outside the domain of Allah's rububiyyah. And so therefore even the servant's actions, we can't say that the servant did the action. Rather, Allah did the action, right? So see, this goes back to the issue of, is Allah the fa'il or is Allah the khaliq, right? So they're saying Allah is the doer of everything. And now, think about this. We'll talk about this a bit more as well, inshallah. That when we apply this to the actions of men, now can you see how this applies to the actions of men? What's the general idea that they're trying to say? Well, if we say that the man is the one who did this good deed, you're saying that the man did it independently, right? And now you're taking it outside the rububiyyah of Allah. Rather, we said that the man was forced to do what he did. The man had no choice. Allah made him do what he did. Right? Only then can we affirm the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this is speaking about the actions of men, right? But what about things which are not from the actions of men? What about, for example, the asbab, the causes and the ways and the means? Like, for example, if I said, water quenches thirst, how would their false principle apply to this as well? They would say that the water didn't quench the thirst, right? Rather, Allah, they're not connected. The water was drunk by a person, Allah created the thirst to coincide with the drinking of the water, not that the water actually quenches the thirst in and of itself. Can you see how this is connected to their view about the actions of men? Because one follows on from the other. This is why they were led to deny that things have inherent qualities and properties, and that there are causes and effects. Right? So by looking at the actions of men, sorry, I've got this. One half is that's correct. The Jabariyah, who are saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who creates the actions of the servants. The servants have no choice whatsoever. There is no independent, choice, acting, and so on and so forth. Allah just decrees this sin upon that person. He will be forced to do it no matter what, right? And then likewise, this then connects to the issue. What about things that take place which are not in human beings? All the other things that are taking place, right? All of the causes and effects that are taking place, right? So, does that mean who is the doer again, right? So, in other words, is the water the quencher of the thirst? Similar to, is it the man who did the good deed? Right? Is it the man who did the good deed, gave the act of charity? Is it the water that quenched the thirst? Right? Is it the rays of the sun that made the plant grow? Right? Or is it, no, Allah is the one who forced that person to do that good deed. That action is Allah's action. Allah is the doer of the action. The servant didn't really do it. The servant is just like a placeholder in which Allah performs His actions. You get that, yeah? Right? The man is just basically essentially like a robot, right? And he's not doing any of his actions. Right? The actions are being done for him, right? Allah is the doer of everything in the creation. If we say that there is a doer in the creation other than Allah, this is a negation of Tawheed. Do you get what they're trying to say? This is the Tawheed of the Jabariyah, that there's no fa'il except Allah. Whereas what we are saying is, there is no khaliq, no creator but Allah. But man is the doer of his actions, right? His actions are created. His actions come under the rububiyyah because they're created actions, although he is the doer of the action. You get that, yeah? Right? In a similar way, water, it has the property of quenching thirst. So we can say the water quenched the thirst. Is this a negation of Tawheed? No, because Allah made it to be like that. Likewise, when we say, the man prayed, the man fasted, the man disobeyed, the man stole, the man cheated, is this now a negation of Tawheed? No, because Allah is the creator of the man, and therefore also his actions. When we say the water quenched the thirst, is that negation of Tawheed? No, because Allah created the water and its properties. You get that? Yeah, you get that? You get all that connection between those, all those things. Right? So the Jabariyah are trying to exaggerate in the issue of Tawheed. And the Qadariyah are trying to play upon the concept of justice to try and say, well, man must be the creator of his own actions. Man creates his own actions outside the control and the power and the knowledge and the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, so we'll stop here, and if you have any questions on this, because it's important that you grasp this thoroughly before we move any further. So any questions on that?
So the Jabariyah exaggerating, thinking that they're perfecting Tawheed, meaning that all actions are from Allah.
Yeah, that's right. That unless we say that Allah is the only doer in the universe, there's no other doer in the universe. The moment you say the man did such and such, the man whatever, you are now ascribing the fi'l to other than Allah. And so in their view, basically you now negated Tawheed. Right? This is the Tawheed of the Jabariyah, and this is what the Ash'aris are upon, because they are Jabariyah. Right? And then this is why, now this is where you have to grasp these things and understand these things, because, like for example, one of their statements you'll find in the books of the Ash'aris, like Al-Ghazali, he will say, nothing exists except Allah and his actions. Now, if you were to read that statement, at face value, just read that statement, you think, well, that makes sense. There's nothing, there's only Allah, and his creation is but his actions. Right? But what they mean by that, now, there's a lot more behind this, because obviously there's a distorted understanding behind this statement. And in fact, there are a number of things which are wrong with that. And one of those things is that what they mean by this as well is that the actions of men are the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is Tawheed to them, but we don't, that's not how it is said. Right? So carry on. So
then you got the other side, the Qadariyah, who are basically looking at the creation and they're thinking, this person...
They are thinking that a person only gets rewarded or punished in a certain way, don't they, in the creation, That, a person from his own volition does something good. He's not forced to do it, so therefore he gets rewarded, right? Or if a person chooses evil from his own volition, right? So, for example, they look in this creation and they say, well, if this person was forced to commit a crime, then he wouldn't be punished. Right? And then they're applying this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? But Allah hasn't forced anyone to do anything, because they haven't understood the levels of qadr properly, right, in the way that we've explained. And so they now made qiyas from what they see as the concept of justice in the creation, and wrongly applied it in a way that really shouldn't be applied in the same way, because there's different parameters at work. Right? So carry on. So basically they're using the concept of justice.
So we would say in this, with the Qadariyah, they are deficient in their Tawheed in that regard, in Rububiyyah, in terms of that they're taking actions. They're not saying that Allah...
That's right, in a way they are negating, they are negating Tawheed. They are basically, because the essence of their saying is that there is another creator and a Lord besides Allah, because there are some things which are outside of Allah's Rububiyyah. Man creates his own actions ibtida'an. Get what we were saying before, That this action of a person initiated right from himself at that point in time, without any previous qadr. Right? So they've taken him outside the qadr of Allah. When we say taking him outside the qadr of Allah, we are really saying taking him outside the rububiyyah of Allah. That's the real implication of it, right? Yeah. Any other questions? Anything not clear?
So, would you say one group are they going to different extremes? One's going to extremes in negligence, and one's going to extremes in terms of.
Well, yeah. One is exaggerating, and one is, both of them are extremes. Yeah. One, you can look at it in two ways. One is exaggerating in Tawheed in a way, in a certain way, and the other one is exaggerating in the actions of man. You get it, yeah? One is exaggerating in actions of man and giving them the level of rububiyyah, like because man is creating his own actions outside the domain of Allah's, knowledge, will, Allah's will and power. And on the other side, the Jabriya, they are saying, well, they are taking actions of men and ascribing them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the sense that Allah is the doer of those actions. Yeah, and then they are removing all the properties in the creation, right? So the property of water quenching thirst now no longer belongs to the water. Allah creates that feeling of removal of thirst to coincide with whenever you're drinking water. So right now you drank that water, right? Instantly Allah created an instance of thirst being quenched at that instance in time. Right, so Allah is simultaneously creating all those things, right? Not that there are properties in things that Allah has put that behave in a certain way, which is what we believe. Because on that basis, this is how we study the world, how we study the universe, how we have, yeah.
So the Jabriya, everyone will be born in paradise?
No, see, with Jabriya then, the concept of justice. See, now you can see how, from one angle you can see that what the Mu'tazila are saying, right, they would be justified in their view if they were looking at the Jabriya, right? Because the Jabriya are saying, well, Allah is just forcing everyone to do whatever they're doing, right? So how would that be just, right? On the other hand, the Jabriya would argue with the Qadariya, well, you're saying man is just completely creating his own action, right? Outside of Allah's, this is an attack upon Tawheed. How can you say that? Right, can you see how this is the same as the question you asked last week about the Khawarij and the Murji'ah? Yeah, the Khawarij said that anyone who commits a major sin or abandons an obligation is a disbeliever. Right? So the Murji'ah looking at this thinking, well, we know this is batil, this is not correct, we know this is not right. Right? And the only way we can refute this is if actions are not from Iman, actions are not from faith. Right? Because, if we say actions are from Iman, that would mean that the Khawarij are correct. Right? So therefore actions cannot be from Iman, and only in this way can we refute the Khawarij, and this is batil. Both statements are batil. Right? So in a similar way, the Qadariya are saying, well, using a wrong concept of justice, well, man must be creating his own actions independently. Right? He's not forced to do anything. Only then does the concept of reward and punishment really apply. So then the Jabriya looking think, well, hang on, you are attacking the Tawheed of Allah, the Rububiyyah of Allah, right? So Allah must be the one who's doing all the actions. Allah is the doer of everything. But they don't realize that in between there is the position that's indicated by the texts of the Quran and the Sunnah. Just like in the issue of Iman, that Iman is belief, speech and action, it is deeds. Right, deeds, Iman increases and decreases. A person can be a believer and commit major sins at the same time. Right? He's a believer but deficient in his faith. All of that is indicated by the text of the Sunnah. Likewise here in the issue of Al-Qadr. Right? Allah, is the knower of all things. Everything's written down. He is the one who wills all things, the one who creates all things. He created man. He gave him the faculties, right, of hearing, seeing, knowing, reflecting, choosing. Sent him books, sent him messengers, gave him the two paths, whatever. He's now free to choose. Right? So man chooses himself, but it follows the will of Allah. Man does his own actions, but Allah is the one who created those actions. He didn't do those actions, He created those actions. All of this coming together, it removes the shubha of the Mu'tazila, of the concept of adl, and it removes the exaggeration of the Jabriya, in removing from man and all created things the faculties that Allah gave them, or the properties that Allah gave them. Man is hearing, man is seeing, man is knowing, man is choosing, willing, man is able, right? And likewise the properties of things. Stones are hard, water is soft, water quenches thirst, fire burns, right? The sun provides light, photons, life-giving qualities. Right? We can ascribe that to the sun because Allah made it like that. Yeah. So one is pushing rububiyyah towards man by making him an independent creator of his own actions, and the other is drawing out the properties and qualities Allah has put in created things and ascribing them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? As in, Allah is the one who did man's actions when he didn't. Allah is not the doer of man's actions. Right? Allah is the one who, so you get the general idea basically what we're speaking about. Right. Any questions still on this before we move any further?
So what would the Qadariyah say about cause and effects and properties of things?
Obviously they affirm the causes and effects, but there's a bit of detail to that. There's a bit of detail to that because you have man's actions and then you have the properties of things, and then what about when men act upon things which don't have choice and will, and I don't want to go into that right now. It's going to make the discussion a bit more complicated. But in general, they affirm the causes and effects. But because of their saying about actions of man, it has an implication upon other things as well. So we'll leave that discussion. Okay, so now we've clearly understood that they are the Jabariyah and the Qadariyah. We're going to look into them in a bit more detail, inshallah, in the next lesson. But just to finish off the little bit of text that we've got left before we start looking at the two groups and the splinter groups. So the first mas'ala then from this is that good and evil are decreed upon the servant, meaning that whatever comes upon a servant of deeds that he does, or calamities that come to him, or good things that befall him, right? So either his own deeds, when we say khair and shar, what do we mean? Khair means deeds that you do yourself, or any goodness that comes to you, right? And evil can mean any evil that you do in your own deeds, or any calamity that comes to you from the qadr of Allah, a calamity, a hardship. Conversely, goodness, some wealth, some fortune, right? Khair and shar, all of it is decreed upon a servant. And so all of this is good and evil in relation to the servant, right? This is good and evil in relation to the servant. So for example, if some wealth comes to you, this now to you is good, right? If some harm, if some illness comes to you, this now is evil. It's evil to you, isn't it? Yeah? If you do a righteous deed, you gave an act of charity, this now is good for you, right? Is that correct? And if you committed a sin, a major sin, for example, this now is evil for you, right? So good and evil, what we see good and evil, this is good and evil, all of it is either good or evil in relation to us, right? But as for the action of Allah in decreeing these things upon His servants, right? So Allah's action is the act of decreeing, not the act of doing, right? Right? Allah's action is the act of decreeing upon the servants. So when we speak about Allah's action of decreeing, there is nothing but goodness. All of it is khair. You see that distinction? In relation to the servants, we see things as evil or good, right? So you do a righteous deed, it's good for you. Some good thing comes to you, like, some good behavior from someone, some benevolence, some riches, some wealth, some worldly thing that comes to you is good. That's good in relation to you. Some evil, you do an evil deed, that's evil in relation to you. Or something harmful happens to you, right? A calamity, an illness, a loss of wealth, a loss of whatever, right? This is evil in relation to you. But when it comes to the action of Allah in decreeing all of those things upon His servant, all of that in relation to the action of Allah in decreeing those things is pure goodness, right? There is no evil in the action of Allah. There is no evil in the action of Allah. Even though Allah decreed al-khair and ash-shar, the action of Allah in decreeing goodness and evil, there is no evil in Allah's action. Rather, all of it is wisdom. There is hikmah in the action and goodness in the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why we have the in the supplication, وَالشَّرُّ لَيْسَ إِلَيْكَ وَالشَّرُّ لَيْسَ إِلَيْكَ. Evil does not return back to you. No evil emanates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In His act of decreeing evil, for example, Iblis and shirk and kufr and murder and all of the other sins and evils that that are harmful to society, in Allah decreeing them, there is no evil in Allah's action of decreeing them. Why? Because behind Allah's action there is a far-reaching wisdom. A far-reaching wisdom. Right? There is a goal and an end. And so therefore Allah is not described, His actions are not described with evil. Rather, all of the actions of Allah are either what? It's only one or two. What is it? It's either adl or fadl. In all of Allah's actions there is adl and fadl. Either adl or fadl. Yeah?
Would you say wisdom as well?
Yeah, of course there's wisdom. We mentioned already there's wisdom in the actions of Allah, but in general there's different ways of looking at it, of course. In every action of Allah there's wisdom. In Allah abandoning some of His servants there is adl. In Allah aiding, giving i'anah to some of His servants there is fadl. You get Allah. No evil comes close to the action. There's no evil that comes back to Allah. It doesn't return back to Allah.
If we look at it like this, okay, in relation to the creation, something good happens to him, wealth comes to him.
Yeah.
That's decreed by Allah. Yeah. Something evil happens, meaning he commits shirk with Allah.
Yeah.
We don't say that Allah decreed that.
No, we do say Allah decreed it. This is from the qadr of Allah. Allah decreed that shirk upon him.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Allah decreed
that.
Yeah, Allah decreed that upon him. But in Allah's action of decreeing him to do shirk, because remember, Allah already knew that from him.
Yeah.
And it was written in the book. And Allah simply facilitated for him the deeds that will lead him to the destination that Allah knew from him, of him, in eternity. Yeah? Right? So when Allah decrees shirk upon a person, right, that there is no evil in Allah's action of doing that.
Right, okay.
You get it, yeah? A person murders somebody else. In relation to us, that is an evil deed. Yeah? Because man's actions, there is evil and good. Right? Because they are going to be held accountable for what they are doing. But in Allah's action of decreeing and willing and allowing murder and decreeing and willing murder, there is no evil in that. Because there is hikmah, there is wisdom and a far-reaching objective behind the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is to test people. Because the creation has been created in order to test people, as Allah says, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. The one who created life and death, death and life, that He may test you to see which of you is best indeed.
So so a person commits shirk, that is from the decree of Allah.
Yeah.
But Allah's action is not evil.
Yeah.
There's a far-reaching wisdom.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
All evil which is decreed by Allah to take place, right? Remember, this is Allah's action of decreeing.
Yeah.
Every action of Allah, there is wisdom in that and goodness in that. There is no evil in the action of Allah, whether it's good in relation to us or evil in relation to us, right? So, for example, as we give the example of a person committing shirk or committing murder, right? In relation to us, it is evil, right? Because our actions are going to be judged. right? And there's right and wrong, truth and falsehood, justice and injustice, right? So therefore, Tawheed is good, Shirk is evil, right? Obedience is good, disobedience is evil. And so on and so forth to all of the sins and acts of obedience, right? But in Allah's actions, all of Allah's actions are good. Yeah? Whether it's guidance, misguidance, calamities that happen, diseases that take place, because those things are not sought in and of themselves, they are means to an end. They are a means to an end. Right? So, favors and bounties are there to test your patience and your gratitude. Calamities are there to test, again, your gratitude and to separate, right? So the decrees of Allah are decreed so that every person goes to his eventual destination, what Allah knows of him and knows about him, which is decreed. So is all making sense?
When a person is born disabled, or what does that come under?
No, a person will not be held accountable for things that he is not capable of doing, right? So again, Allah's action of, for example, there are disabled people. This is from the wisdom of Allah, far-reaching wisdom and perfection in the action of Allah, in that His servants can be grateful and think, well, look at this, I need to be grateful. How can I claim that I'm in a bad position or underprivileged when I've got this person who can't walk, or this person who can't speak, or this person who can't see, or this person who can't even think and reflect and make decisions? How can I be underprivileged? I need to be grateful. So the presence of that category of people is from the far.
Perfect from the angle of Allah creating it, but it's like
deficient from our point of view. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this is all part and parcel of Allah's perfection, in that He creates whatever He wills. That's why we have the ayah in the Quran that He can. We'll come to later on, inshallah. That He is not asked about what He does, but they will be asked about what they do. And in many cases, we might know the wisdom behind certain things in the creation. A lot of the times, we might not know what the wisdom is, right? And that's why you see a lot of the kuffar, disbelievers, they try to question the wisdoms in things which it's not possible to know. And they use them as shubuhat, as doubts against Islam, against the Quran.
They compare it to the creation, don't they?
They make false analogies, in things they don't even understand. Right? So, in relation to Allah, all of Allah's actions are goodness. And in relation to the creation, that's where evil and goodness comes in relation to us. Right? So that's why, as we see in وَالْخَيْرُ كُلُّهُ بِيَدَيْكَ, all goodness is in your hands. وَالشَّرُّ لَيْسَ إِلَيْكَ, evil does not come near to you. Cannot be returned back to you. Doesn't approach you. It's not traced back to you, because all of Allah's actions is perfect goodness. Right. So in every calamity, every evil, there's a far-reaching wisdom behind it that maybe we may or we may not understand. As an example, a person might lose someone in the family, might lose some wealth. This in relation to him is evil. But in relation to the qadr of Allah and the action of Allah in decreeing that, there's nothing but goodness, because we're not looking at just the issue in and of itself, we're looking at the far-reaching wisdom and the behind it, and which is that Allah is testing the servants, is testing the living. We mentioned the ayah, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. And so the actions of Allah, all of them are goodness. But as for what is ascribed, so the actions ascribed to Allah are all good. The actions ascribed to the servants can be good or evil. And that's a basic, essential difference. So, okay, we can stop there. And then next lesson we're going to focus a bit more now on the Jabariyah and the Qadariyah. We'll try to complete that section, inshallah, in the next lesson. So before we conclude, anything still not clear, because I know that a lot of things to take in at the same time. So,
Did the Qadariyah deny the writing as well?
Qadariyah, yes.
So they
Yeah.
deny Allah's knowledge of that.
Yeah. Well, actually, no. So there's two groups amongst them. We're going to discuss this in the next lesson. There's two groups. There are those who are the extremists who deny Allah's prior knowledge. Right? They deny Allah's prior knowledge. And so therefore, by necessity, they have to deny the writing as well. Or they have like a certain way of explaining, right? So that's one group, and I'll come back to this in a minute. And second are those who affirm the writing and the ilm, but they say that man actually, he wills and creates his own actions outside of Allah's will and creative power, right? So they agree, yes, Allah knows everything in advance, but man is free to choose his own actions. So Allah does not have any control or power over what man does. You get it, yeah? Right. But coming back to the first issue, there are those who said, well, Allah does not know what happens until after it happens. Right? They're the ones who the scholars declared as disbelievers.
The extreme Qadariyah.
Extreme Qadariyah. Now, obviously, they're supposed to have died out, and historically they did die out. But you'll find people today with statements which really, when you think about them, they're really kind of going back to the saying of those people. Now, what's the name of that? Shabir Ali.
Shabir Ali.
I think it's Canadian, the Shabir Ali, probably wherever. Now, he says something. He says basically that in the book, in the writing, what Allah mentions is just the general principles, right? That if this person was in this circumstance, then he may do this, and this, right? Not that this person will do this, and this. Do you get the difference now? Right? So what he's saying is that the book in the Kitab, Allahul Mahfuz, what is written is not the actual thing that happens, but the range of possible things that can happen, that a person can choose given the circumstances that he is in. Right? Right? That's what he's basically claiming is in the book. Right? So essentially what that really means, the implication of that is that really Allah does not know which action a servant is going to choose in a given circumstance, but He knows all of the range of possibilities that can take place. Right? Really, what this is really saying is the same as what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
In a deceptive, because what he's really saying is, well, Allah doesn't know what the servant is going to do until after he's done it. Right? And the reasoning for this is exactly the same as what the first Qadariyah was saying. Well, how can it be just? If Allah decrees upon a servant, do goodness, and then reward him for goodness, where's the justice in that? Allah decrees upon a person evil, he does evil, then he gets punished for it, where's the justice in that? Right? The same shubha is what he's trying to answer by giving this this explanation. Right? That's what's in the, and he's doing that when people are raising these questions to him, that, well, how can it be from justice that Allah, decrees upon a servant evil deeds and then, he gets punished? How is that? And this is why he comes with this explanation that, a person is sat there and he has all these ranges of actions he can possibly choose in that given circumstance. That's what's written. And that's what Allah knows. Right? You get, so you can see how it's identical, but just put in a more sophisticated form.
And that's what they're doing, and they just put it in a deceptive form.
But that's the same as all of the Ahlul Bidah. Right? When you look at the Khawarij today, it's the same underlying principles of just hidden behind sophistication. Right? And it's not just with the people of Bid'ah, it's the same with the disbelievers and the atheists. Right? It's the same, it's just a much more sophisticated way of saying exactly the same thing. Right? When you get to the crux of what they're saying, it's like this atheist fundamentalists, this Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss and these people, right? If you go right to, if you imagine a pyramid and you turn it the opposite way around, right? So the point is pointing towards the bottom, right? And the point is really the crux of everything, right? It's the weakest point, but it's the crux of everything that all the rest of the weight is actually standing upon, yeah? right? So at the top you see all of the weight and the sophistication and whatever, and all the great, when you get right to the bottom and you get to the weakest point, what is the weakest point that's actually standing upon, right? And what they are really saying is, they're saying that, and this is literally what they are saying, I'm not making this up, they are saying that from nothing something can come. Yeah. Universe can actually be created from nothing by itself. Right? And then when you see them, define what is nothing. They say, nothing is something that's very, very simple, right? Contradiction, right? Most people would have the idea of that nothing is like this, but, it's something that's very hard to understand. Do you get it? Nothing and then something in the same sentence, right? Yeah. So the asal of their whole batil religion is founded upon what? Sophistry, making fools of people, making idiots of people, playing with words, right? That universes can come from nothing. But what is nothing? It's something that's very, 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 and then they start using the word something, right? How can you define nothing? You can't define nothing. Nothing is nothing. Nothing is no thing, right? So really what they're saying is, when you think about the concept, they're trying to say something created itself. That's what they're really trying to say. Nothing is just deception, right? The nothing they're speaking about is actually something, and then they're saying something created itself. So really what they want you to believe is the same as saying, the bottle brought its own existence. Right? That's what they want you to believe. That's the sum of their argument. But it's just covered in so much sophistication about, yes, there's quantum fluctuations and the sea of potential energy, and then the fluctuation happened and then there was an expansion, and then so you give them that initial batil, idiotic, foolish, mental cripple belief, that they want you to submit to. They say, give us that belief and then we can explain everything else. Let us believe in that one thing. Give us that one thing and we can explain everything else to you. Right? That's no difference that's like when we say, it was a creator that created everything. Right? Their version is simply saying, something created itself. Now we put these two things in front of a person, in front of a rational thinking person. That's what Allah says in the Quran, Am khuliqu min ghayri shay'in. Am humul khaliqun. Am khalaqu samawati wal ard. Were they created by nothing? Are they the creators, or did they create the heavens and the earth? You can only put these two scenarios in front of a person. Right? Either something creates something else, or something creates itself. Put those two in front of a rational person, in front of a child, and tell us what the rational is, the correct decision is, and then that becomes clear. Right? So the whole sophistry is built upon that one thing. Everything else, Big Bang, expansion, cosmic evolution, geological evolution, Darwinian evolution, till you get to where we are now. Everything rests upon that batil, that foolish, idiotic nonsense they want you to believe. Well, all that's just concealed and hidden. And what we have is a sophisticated science, at the top. So, in a similar way that we are speaking about the people of bid'ah, that there's nothing new. It's the same bid'ah, but just presented in a more sophisticated way. Whether it's the Murji'ah, Khawarij, Qadariyah, Mu'tazila, same thing. Okay, we'll conclude our lesson today. Inshallah, we'll continue with the Qadariyah and the Jabariyah, inshallah, in the next lesson. We'll conclude there. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.